Hello and welcome, I'm DDF Racer, and for those of you who are not familiar with the channel, I'm a sim racer, specifically a VR sim racer. Since 2016, I've been using this, an Oculus Rift CV1 for all of my races and rallies. And I do mean all of them. Every video, every live stream, every offline practice session I've done for years has been from inside this headset, and I love the thing, but if you know anything about VR, then you'll know that the CV1 is a little bit outdated these days. I mean, it's still pretty solid, but come on, it's 8 years old now. Upgrading my VR headset has been on my to-do list for a while now, and to be honest, is probably the most frequently asked question I get in the comments. Since it was announced, the Pimax Crystal Light has been near the top of my wish list because the specs on it, pun completely intended, are absolutely insane, but it's not exactly cheap either. So yeah, you can imagine my response a few weeks ago when Pimax themselves emailed me to see if I'd like one for free to review and keep.
No! God, please, no! 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 No!
Just kidding. I said yes. So in this video, I'm going to be unboxing and trying out the Pimax Crystal Light for the first time to see what it's like, and also to compare it to my old CV1 to see what kind of improvements and differences there are in the last 8 years of VR technology, and also to help you decide if you want to get one as well. After all, only around 6% of the people who actually watch these videos are already subscribed, so the chances are you probably found this video by searching for a Pimax review, am I right? Disclaimer time. Whilst Pimax may have sent me this VR headset for free, they did it with absolutely no obligation other than making this video, and even then they gave me an open script to do that. All of these opinions are my own, and despite what some of the more cynical people might think, I haven't been coerced into signing some kind of agreement that forces me to say nice things about them. If I say good stuff, then it's because I genuinely mean it, but also, if I don't like something about the Crystal Light, then I will be calling them out on it. And trust me, I've seen quite a few posts on the Pimax subreddit about quality control issues with the lenses. At the end of the day, I may not have paid for this, but you might want to, and it's my responsibility to make sure that I give you an honest, unbiased review in order for you to make an informed decision. Yeah, I mean, Pimax may have given me an affiliate link which is down in the video description, and gives me a small commission of any sales that are made through that link, but honestly, I'm not doing it for that. Go and have a look at all of my videos and live streams from the past 5 years, and you see that I'm not a dedicated product reviewer or a hardware channel. I'm just a sim racer and part-time YouTube guy who loves VR and honestly is just as excited to see what's inside this box as you are. So, yeah. Oh, look at it, it's huge! It's not going to be winning any awards for smallest VR headset anytime soon, is it? I mean, big screen beyond, I've got nothing to worry about here, but it's even bulkier than a Quest 3 or a HP Reverb. Wow, the size of it! And you can definitely tell this is a review copy as well. The foam on the back though is looking slightly worse for wear, so someone's definitely used this before. Now, this is a PC-only VR headset, plugging in directly to the computer through a DisplayPort 1.4 cable and USB 3.0 connector, and also getting its power through this adapter. So no batteries or wireless technology here, which does save a bit of weight and also removes the reliance on having a good Wi-Fi signal, but it does mean you can't just walk around the house with it on freely or use it as a standalone VR headset. There is a decent length on the cable, around 4.5 meters, but it is extremely bulky and heavy and doesn't quite have the flexibility that you'd expect from something like a USB cable. Whether or not that's an issue, I'll find out shortly when I start using it, but as a sim racer, for 99% of the time, I'm sat down in the same fixed position, so I don't imagine it'll be too much of a problem. But for those of you who like to play active games like Beat Saber, for example, probably not the best VR headset to use. You can see these little cameras on it too, which are for the inside-out tracking and pass-through mode. Pass-through mode allows you to see what's going on outside the headset without having to take it off. Particularly useful if you've got it sitting just right on your face and you just need a quick look down at your keyboard, for example. With inside-out tracking, the cameras in the headset basically use fixed points from around the room and calculate it all from that. And that's a great upgrade for me because my old Oculus CV1 used infrared tracking and separate USB sensors, so I mean, those 2 extra free ports freed up on my PC immediately. Pimax do recommend having some high contrast objects scattered around the room though to help avoid any potential tracking issues, so I printed out a few generated QR codes out and stuck them to the walls in here, just to be safe. In addition to the lens issues I mentioned earlier, tracking issues are also one of the main complaints on the Pimax subreddit that I've seen, so I'll be keeping an eye on that later. Also in the box are 2 hand controllers with USB charging cables. Now, I personally don't use controllers in VR that much, if at all, because I've got a steering wheel, pedals, handbrake, button box, and all that for when I'm racing. But for the sake of this review, I'll give them a try later with some Skyrim VR or something. By the way, I don't know what it is, but I love that new technology smell. Like, probably sounds crazy, but you know what I mean, right? It's new car, new phone, even like a new set of cables. It's just that, I don't know, there's just something
very satisfying.
Anyway, there's also a couple of optional extras you can get, which includes this 15mm facial foam kit, and also some upgradable DMAS headphones. Although I didn't get any in the box, so I can't give you a review of those, unfortunately. I'll just be using my standard headphones today. As for the built-in microphone, well, this is the mic I've been using for the video so far. My wireless Antline mod mic, and let me just switch my audio source here. And here is the Pimax Crystal Light mic. Of course, it's not quite got the same audio quality, but it's by no means bad. Perfectly usable for things like Discord and TeamSpeak, but if you're going to be recording content using the headset, then you're probably still going to want to use a proper microphone for good quality audio. And one more thing I've got here, by the way, is prescription lens inserts. I already use them on my CV1, and they're great, as I don't need to try and squash my glasses in there too, and risk fogging up or, worse, damaging the lenses themselves. These aren't Pimax though, they're a third-party add-on from a company called VR Wave. I mean, you probably could fit a pair of glasses in there, but I doubt it's going to be a super comfortable experience, especially without the extra foam interface. So that's the hardware side of things covered, but in terms of software, you'll need to download and install Pimax Play to use this headset. Now, I initially did have some problems getting my computer to actually detect the crystal light for some reason. After swapping things around a bit and eventually disconnecting everything but my main monitor, it finally registered, and I could then update the headset firmware and then connect back up my other monitors with no issues. Not quite sure what happened there. Maybe some kind of Pimax DisplayPort bug. Who knows? Once you've got it all connected though, the software itself is actually really easy to use and comes with a lot of built-in options to help optimize the VR experience, such as changing the render resolution, refresh rate, image smoothing, brightness, color balance, eye distance offset values, and so on. You can also save individual profiles to remember your different specific settings per game, which is pretty handy if you like to really deep dive and fine-tune it per application. One important thing to note though is that unlike the original Pimax Crystal, the Crystal Light doesn't have eye tracking, which also means it doesn't have dynamic foveated rendering. For those who don't know what foveated rendering is, in rather simplified terms, it means rendering the outside of the image with less detail, therefore reducing the demand on your computer since you're not rendering the full image at maximum detail. Generally, you only need the center of your view to be super sharp, and with dynamic foveated rendering, the eye tracking will always allow that sharp spot to be rendered exactly where you're looking. However, without eye tracking, you only have fixed foveated rendering, which means that just the center of the lens will be sharp. You still get performance gains, but you'll need to physically turn your whole head to maintain that sharpness instead of just moving your eyes around. Thanks to a recent update, the Pimax software now comes with its own OpenXR runtime as well. No more hacky workarounds like the previous versions. I'm not going to delve into the specifics of what that actually and technically means because honestly it's a little bit confusing and it's an absolute rabbit hole to go down, and to be honest I kind of want to try and keep this video under about 3 hours if possible. But long story short, this Pimax integrated runtime means that the Crystal Light can run games in OpenXR, either natively or through OpenComposite, and bypass Steam VR completely, which generally speaking can get you some massive performance gains. And with all of that set up and ready to go, I just wanted to run through a few of the technical specifications on the Pimax Crystal Light very quickly before heading out on track. I know, I'm dying to actually use it for the first time and see what it's like, and you're probably sat there waiting for my reaction to it all as well, but to be honest, there's some very impressive things about this headset which you should probably know and will give everything I say in VR a lot more context. Probably the most eye-catching feature is the resolution. 2880 by 2880 pixels per eye on a QLED and mini LED display with local dimming too. More on that shortly. That is a lot of pixels to play with and a massive boost compared to my old CV1. Cramming more pixels into the same amount of space means a much sharper image, specifically 35 ppd for the Crystal Light. And for sim racing, that means things like the data readouts on your steering wheel, braking markers at long distances, menu text and so on should be so much easier to see. Compare that to my old CV1, which was only running at 1080 by 1200 per eye, and even the highly praised Quest 3, which only reaches 2064 by 2208 per eye. Also, the refresh rate. The Crystal Light is capable of running at up to 120 Hz, which, I mean, the higher the refresh rate, the better in terms of smoothness, and also avoiding motion sickness for those of you who may be prone to that. Of course, you're going to have the CPU and GPU to keep up with that, and Pimax recommends at the absolute minimum a 3080 graphics card and a 12th generation i5 processor or equivalent, because running at a higher refresh rate with the increased resolution as well is going to be so much more demanding on your hardware because you're pushing more pixels at faster rate in the same amount of time. As is the case with VR to begin with anyway, sacrifices will need to be made in terms of in-game graphics quality settings, either that or running at a lower refresh rate. And to be fair, Pimax have actually got you covered on that one, by the way. Most headsets only offer one refresh rate. For example, my old CV1 was locked in at 90, but here you can drop the Crystal Light down from 120 to 90 or even 72. The field of view, or FOV in this thing, is also quite impressive as well, at around about 115 degrees horizontal, which in terms of pure numbers might not sound that impressive, but to give it some context, my old CV1 was only 90 degrees horizontal, which that's a massive increase. The higher the horizontal FOV, the more peripheral vision you have out to the sides, with less of that tunnel vision effect going on, and the Crystal Light is unmatched in this area. For reference, the Meta Quest 3 is the only one that comes close at 110 degrees, and even the big screen beyond only gets to 102. Now, not everybody's skulls are the same size, and naturally there's going to be differences in how far apart everyone's eyes are, which is probably quite an odd thing to say out of context. But having the lenses line up properly inside the headset with the user's IPD or interpupil distance makes a massive difference in terms of visual clarity. For reference, my IPD is 67mm and the Crystal Light can range from anywhere between 58 and 72mm. Believe it or not though, some VR headsets such as the DPVR E4 and Quest 2 don't allow you to do that. You get what you get, and if your eyes don't line up properly, then too bad, so sad for you, I guess. On the other hand, headsets like the Varjo Aero are super fancy with built-in lens motors that automatically detect your IPD and move the lenses for you. The Crystal Light is somewhere in the middle of those two options, just like my old CV1 actually, where there's a little manual control that allows you to adjust the IPD yourself. One more thing I want to talk about very quickly before we get stuck in is local dimming, which I mentioned briefly earlier. Instead of using a backlight to illuminate the entire display, including any pixels that are black, the display in the Pimax Crystal Light has the ability to only backlight specific areas, which means that the dark areas are actually properly dark, which should help to significantly improve contrast and reduce glare. So, yeah, I think it's time to try this thing out now. And of course, first up, it had to be AMS2, the sim known for having not only beautiful VR, but incredibly well-optimized VR as well. Okay, wow. Wow, the sharpness of this image is absolutely insane. It's like looking at a monitor, it really is. I know that sounds obvious, but there is no screen door effect, there is no anti-aliasing at all that I can see going on. Everything's so sharp. Wow. And I'm not even moving yet, I'm just sat in the pits. Although something I have noticed very briefly is some kind of chromatic aberration effect. The closer a straight line or the closer any detail gets towards the edge of the lenses, it kind of warps color a little bit. It's like the colors are bleeding out ever so slightly. Not sure what's going on. Anyway, let's get this thing started and let's actually go and do some driving, shall we? Now, I'm not getting any stutters in the headset so far, running at 120 Hz, and it seems pretty smooth. It seems to be able to keep up with this rather nicely. Oh, actually, no, I'm noticing a few. It's probably struggling a bit. It's not entirely smooth. I probably have to turn a few settings down here and go again, I'd say. And obviously this is just me on track by myself. When there's other cars, when there's sunset, when there's rain, extra lights going on, of course that's gonna affect it. But just the sharpness and the detail, wow. Incredible. I've probably spoiled myself. That's with a P, spoiled with a P, because yeah, I've whacked it up to full resolution, full refresh rates. This is as sharp as it's going to look. You know, this is native res. Wow. I'm probably going to say that a lot in this video. Wow. But it is. That's the only word I can think of that accurately describes what I'm experiencing right now. It's just wow. Being able to see the individual notches on the speedo, I can see the writing. That red button says push to display, RPM times 1000. I couldn't read that before. I can read the dials over there. I can see the braking markers way in the distance. Not that there are any at the moment, but those spectators, they were just like 1 or 2 pixels before. Well, I mean, well, not literally. There'd have been a few more pixels than that. You can see so much further down the road. It's not just the sharpness of the image as well. The fact that there's no rays, like God rays, there's no like bloom, there's no noticeable light bleeding through the edges of stuff. I mean, obviously apart from that chromatic aberration that I just mentioned. But no, it's incredible just how clear this is. Crystal clear. To throw another terrible pun in there. Anyway, I'm gonna go back to the settings. I'm gonna turn the resolution down a bit because I think that I could definitely get a lot more smoothness out of this. Something I will say immediately is that it gets very hot in here. I've literally done like a lap and a half, and it's warm. It's very warm. Something else I did want to point out as well is the fact that the foam interface that I'm using, I have actually immediately gone and used the extra 15mm, because the one that the Pimax Crystal Light ships with is it's a bit too thin, and it was pressing right on the bridge of my nose. It was really digging into my face, and it was super uncomfortable. So you know how I said that foam was an optional upgrade? It's a mandatory upgrade. I hate to say it, but yeah, you do need that. Just the way it presses on your face, you need that extra padding. So yeah, very warm, quite heavy, and quite uncomfortable compared to what I'm used to. I mean, the visuals are great, but comfort isn't winning it so far. One other thing very quickly, it's not as easy to take on and off as my old CV1. You can't just like stretch the headband and pull it up on top of your head. You do have to do the undo of the clicky thing on the back here, and then yeah, readjust it. Okay, so this is now running at 50% resolution and 90 Hertz instead of 120. And it does feel a bit smoother. It's still a bit stuttery. That's the minimum you can do in the render resolution in the Pimax software. You have to run it at 0.5 at the minimum. So maybe I have to go into the Steam VR settings and reduce the resolution even further there. Actually, I'm glad I lost control a bit there, because I can really notice the stutteriness there when the car's like moving around a bit quicker. Yeah, now that is very stuttery. Yeah, wow, look at that. That is quite uncomfortable. That's yeah, that's something. Alright, so that is the absolute minimum. Rendering at 25% in Steam VR and rendering at 50% in the Pimax software. So let's see how this goes. This should look terrible, but at least it'll give me a good benchmark. Oh yeah, that's significantly worse. But it runs very smoothly. Yeah, that's butter. That's absolutely butter, that is. So, yeah, I was running the resolution a bit too high before. Oh, that's flawless now in terms of smoothness and frame rates. That's really nice. So, yeah, I just need to find that middle ground between smoothness and detail, and then probably recalculate it all again when, you know, the sun sets, when there's rain, when there's other cars on track, and then each sim is going to have a different value as well. So yeah, this could take a while. So let's cue the editing. Well, that was a bit of an understatement. I'm actually recording this part of the video a couple of weeks later because, honestly, that's how long it's taken me to get the most out of the Pimax Crystal Light and get to a point where I actually feel comfortable saying I know what I'm doing with it. Whenever I get a new piece of gear on the channel, I like to do a genuine, hands-on, first impression kind of what it's like straight out of the box kind of thing, but honestly, I just couldn't do that with the Pimax Crystal Light. The rest of that first initial driving session was literally about 5 or 6 hours of me just playing around with settings across various sims, just trial and error, getting a bit tired and getting a bit frustrated and not really saying much to the camera. And trust me, nobody needs to see that. Sure, you can just plug it in and drive using the default settings in Steam VR like I did initially, but you're going to be leaving so much performance on the table. And when it comes to using a headset like this, you really need to get things running as efficiently as possible, because what's the point of having all those pixels at such a good refresh rate if you can't actually use them? And this is what I hate about this headset the most. Actually, probably this is what I hate about VR in general the most, to be honest. It is not a plug-and-play experience. It doesn't just work. I mean, maybe with a more mainstream headset like a Meta Quest 3 it might, but with Pimax you kind of feel like you're part of an early access project or a developer test team. You're trying things out for the first time and then spending hours going through forums and Reddit for performance tips, optimizing settings for every different game you want to use, and trying to work out why this isn't compatible or why that runs terribly. The Pimax software itself is constantly being updated too, which is essentially a good thing, I guess, because it means there's actually improvements to be made, but things can change without notice and break all of your settings. You can spend a lot of time configuring and testing and reconfiguring, only to have to start all over again the next time Pimax drop an update because, well, now there's a new set of variables in the mix. Also, is this game OpenXR native or does it need Open Composite? Or is it not compatible with either and it needs Steam VR instead? And if so, what render resolution can I get away with whilst maintaining consistent frame rates? Oh, and what frame rate is that, by the way? 120, 90, 72? I mean, let's not talk about 60 because that option's not actually in the software anyway. Maybe I should turn my in-game settings down a bit, or maybe increase the foveated rendering strength. Also, depending on what render method, what software do I need to show my live chat in the headset while streaming? And just, mate, I just want to get in and drive. The comfort is also a bit of an issue as well. It's heavy, it's bulky, it gets very warm, and the head strap and cable at the back stick out just a bit too much to let me fully sit back in the chair and get comfortable. The upgraded thicker foam facial interface is an absolute necessity too. It is not optional. The standard foam that the Crystal Light comes with is just way too thin and uncomfortable, even after just a few minutes. I'm not even sure why it actually ships with that, to be honest. I also noticed a very slight feeling of cross-eyedness after a while, which I couldn't quite put my finger on and couldn't really adjust using the IPD offset values in the software either. Compared to my old Oculus CV1, which I could use for literally hours and hours without any issues, I found myself needing to take off the Crystal Light every 30 minutes or so and rest my eyes, so I don't know, maybe over time I'll just get used to it. I mean, I don't think it's a lens quality issue. They seem fine to me without any kind of obvious warping or defects, but looking at the Reddit I can see plenty of people who've had bad lenses in their headsets which needed to be returned or even replaced. Pimax appear to be doing what they can to get on top of quality control, but it does seem like there might be a little bit of a lottery on whether you get lucky or not with the lenses. So that's definitely something to keep in mind. When you do get it all adjusted to your face and dialed in with the settings though, oh my god, wow, is it an incredible experience, and I've never experienced anything quite like it. The clarity is superb and the immersion, I know it's a cliche thing to say, but you really truly do feel like you sat there in the car like an actual proper racing driver. It's so good. Now, if I had to buy the Pimax Crystal Light outright instead of receiving this one to review for free, then it'd set me back $899 US, or only $699 US without the controllers and local dimming feature though. Now, by itself, that's actually a pretty reasonable cost as far as VR headsets go, especially considering the specifications on this thing, but you are going to need a pretty beefy PC to get even the bare minimum out of the headset, and that's not going to be cheap. I'm not able to push the Pimax Crystal Light anywhere near what it's capable of on my 3080 10GB card and Ryzen 5800X3D CPU, and while this might not be top of the range gear, it's still what I'd like to think you can consider decent. My biggest concern is that if my GPU decides to melt anytime soon, then I'm gonna need to spend thousands of dollars, which I don't have, on a 4090 or 5090 whenever they release. When you start adding all of these things up, along with the costs of a steering wheel, pedals, sim rig and so on, it becomes quite apparent how absurdly expensive it is to be a VR sim racer, to the point where it's unattainable for the vast majority, unfortunately. Sometimes it almost feels as if VR was made specifically for sim racing. It's that good. So it is a massive shame that most people will only get to experience it through a single monitor setup. One of the most frustrating things as someone who makes VR content for YouTube is that I can't actually technically show you what VR is like. Yeah, sure, I can show you this raw rendered image that's being sent to one of the lenses, but that doesn't actually give you any of the depth perception, any of the spatial awareness, or any of the clarity you'd get if you were actually wearing the headset for yourself. It honestly just doesn't convey that feeling of being there in the car, like being in the VR headset does, and no amount of special video trickery will ever get that across in a flat 2D image. If you've used VR before, you'll know exactly what I mean, but if you haven't, then I urge you to give it a try somehow. Either harass a mate who's got a headset, or see if there's one at a local arcade somewhere, and I guarantee you that you'll have one of those "holy sh**, this is amazing" moments. And then imagine that, but so much clearer, so much more vibrant, so much wider. And that's the Pimax Crystal Light. Never mind big screen beyond, this is beyond belief. The only quest you'll be going on anytime soon is to find the extra dollars and time off work to have this strapped to your face forever. I'm sorry. I honestly cannot convey how good this headset is in terms of image quality. It just looks so good. Provided you have the hardware to run it even remotely near full resolution, the Pimax Crystal Light will completely revolutionize your sim racing experience. And that's coming from someone who's used VR pretty much exclusively for 8 years and is probably a little bit desensitized to this kind of thing by now. Many of the flaws that people raise about using VR compared to a standard monitor or triples just simply aren't there anymore. You have a noticeable amount of peripheral vision, but also the clarity to see all the small details too. I'm not on about individual leaves on the track here and there which are a "oh that's nice" kind of thing. I'm talking about practical stuff like actually being able to read the display on your steering wheel or small text in the menus. You don't need to guess or try and remember which braking marker that is in the distance because you can quite clearly read it even from a long way out. Sure, I mean there's a tiny amount of chromatic aberration going on towards the edges of the lenses, but that's only really noticeable on super high contrast things with straight edges, like a data overlay for example. You're not distracted by the dreaded screen door effect or jagged lines flickering in and out of existence. There's no light bloom or god rays shining in your face. It's truly incredible. And in terms of the inside-out tracking, I mean, yeah, it's good. I personally didn't have any issues with the VR position drifting over time, or suddenly jittering or warping around. Maybe it's all these QR codes I've stuck to the walls that are helping out with that. To be honest, I didn't actually try it without them, so maybe it's that, or maybe it's the fact that my room is also quite well lit for video recording purposes, but I mean, at no point did I think, oh, I'm gonna need to get some base stations here, thankfully. And as for the controllers, yeah, they worked. They were fine. Absolutely no issues here with the tracking. The buttons felt nice, they connected first time, no issues. And it is nice having a USB rechargeable controller instead of having to chew through AA batteries like my previous Oculus controllers. To be fair though, I probably didn't give them an extensive test. I mean, I just went for a quick session in Google Earth and then also a run around in Skyrim VR, because as a sim racer, probably the extent of needing controllers would just be to position a pinned window inside the headset, like a data overlay, or in my case, my live chat whilst I'm streaming. And also with the 4.5 meter cable, that does kind of limit you a little bit in terms of play space, so this isn't really a headset that you're going to be standing up and jumping around and dancing in, to be fair. This Pimax Crystal Light is quite clearly intended for the seated position, for simulators, for somewhere that you're not going to move around, so as nice as the controllers are, I don't think they're the main selling point here. So, with everything said and done, and with all that taken into consideration, even with all the negatives about the comfort and the lack of user-friendliness, I can safely say that this Pimax Crystal Light is going to be my new default VR headset moving forwards. Now that I've got it all configured and worked out, for the moment at least, the positives about this thing are just so overwhelmingly positive. It's such an incredible piece of technology and such a massive jump on my old Oculus CV1 that it's going to be so hard to go back to that now that I've seen the light. Wait, I didn't even mean that one. Yeah, it might be bulky and you might need a beast of a computer to run it, but if you're seriously considering one of these, then you probably already have the hardware to run it, or at least the budget for an upgrade. Now, this is definitely a future-proof VR headset as well, that the market will grow into once the next few generations of GPU and CPU come along that can allow the Pimax Crystal Light to really stretch its legs. With a wide field of view, super sharp detail, high refresh rate, low latency, and no dropouts due to the fixed cable approach, for sim racing specifically, what more do you need? It's perfect. Pimax may only have sent me this to make a review video, but honestly there is no way that I'm not going to be using this for all of my races and streams from now on. Just wow. And I can't even begin to express how grateful I am, not only to them, but to you as well for watching, liking, commenting, subscribing, generally supporting the channel, and making it possible for me to do what I do on YouTube and have companies sending me stuff like this. Like, honestly, it's ridiculous that I get to make videos like this, so thank you. Genuinely, thank you.